The sound of his palm cracking against my cheek silenced the entire ballroom. Gasps echoed. Champagne flutes froze mid-air. A pianist somewhere in the background missed a note. My head snapped to the side, the sting of the slap spreading across my face like wildfire. The world blurred for a second. Not from pain, but from sheer disbelief. Adrian Monroe, my husband of 20 years, had just slapped me. In public. In front of 100 high society elites. For her. Luciana Sinclair, his 20-something gold-digging mistress, stood by his side, clutching her champagne flute with a smirk playing at the edges of her lips. She didn't look surprised. No. She looked satisfied. Like she had won. A hush settled over the room as I slowly turned my head back to face Adrian. He stood there, breathing heavily, his jaw clenched, his hand still mid-air as if even he couldn't believe what he had done. I touched my cheek, feeling the heat of humiliation crawl up my skin. Every pair of eyes in that ballroom was glued to me, waiting, expecting me to break, to crumble. I smiled. A slow, dangerous smile. The kind that should have sent chills down Adrian's spine. I took a step forward. You just made the worst mistake of your life. Before he could react, before the murmurs could erupt into full-fledged chaos, I reached for the nearest champagne glass and hurled it straight at Luciana's pristine white gown. The red liquid splattered across her like fresh blood, staining the fabric, staining her perfectly curated image. She screamed. Oh, how satisfying that sound was. Adrian turned on me, furious. Kassandra, what the hell? I tilted my head, my voice smooth as silk. Oh, did that embarrass you? I asked sweetly, my smile widening. Imagine how I felt when my husband humiliated me in front of the entire city for his little plaything. Luciana gasped. Excuse me? I ignored her, my eyes locked on Adrian. He looked livid, his fists clenched, his ego burning. But underneath all that, I saw something else. Panic. He knew this wasn't over. I leaned in just enough for him to hear me over the growing murmurs of the crowd. You should have killed me, Adrian. My voice dropped lower. Because now, I'm going to burn your world to the ground. I turned on my heel and walked out of that ballroom, leaving behind a scandal that would be whispered about for years. But that was just the beginning. Adrian Monroe thought he could break me. He thought I was just a pretty, obedient wife who would swallow her humiliation and stay quiet. He had no idea who he had just betrayed. And by the time I was done with him, he wouldn't have a single penny, a single friend, or a single shred of power left to his name. Game on, darling. I made you, Adrian. Now I'll unmake you. The words echoed in my head as I sat in the back of my sleek black car, my fingers tapping against the leather seat. The city lights blurred past, but my mind was razor sharp. The slap, the humiliation, the betrayal, it was all fuel. Adrian Monroe thought I was weak, that I would cry in some corner, drown myself in vodka, and beg for his attention like the women he discarded so easily. He had no idea who I was. 20 years ago, when Adrian was just an ambitious nobody, I was the one who pushed him into the right circles. I dressed him, coached him, and whispered the names of the people he needed to impress. I built him. And tonight he thought he could tear me down? I smirked. Oh, he was about to learn. My first call was to my lawyer. Vincent, it's time, I said the moment he answered. There was a pause, then a chuckle. So, he finally did it? I stared out of the tinted windows. He didn't just cheat, Vincent. He hit me, in front of the entire city. Vincent swore under his breath. Then let's ruin him. My lawyer had been waiting for this moment. For years, I had secretly prepared for the possibility of Adrian betraying me. I knew his weaknesses, his secrets, his illegal business dealings, the things he thought I was too naive to notice. I had everything I needed to destroy him. Step 1, freeze his assets. By morning, I told Vincent, I want every account tied to my name locked. The mansion, the cars, the art collection. Everything I have ever signed for stays with me. If Adrian wants to keep his lifestyle, he'll have to fight me for it. Vincent laughed. Oh, he's going to lose. Badly. I ended the call, but I wasn't done yet. I had one more person to deal with. Luciana Sinclair. That pathetic little gold digger thought she had won. Thought she could waltz into my life and take what I had built. She had no idea the hellstorm she had just walked into. I made my second call, this time to an old friend. Leon, I purred, I have a favor to ask. The deep chuckle on the other end sent a shiver of satisfaction through me. Kassandra DeLuca asking for a favor? Now this is interesting. Leon was the kind of man who operated in the shadows, someone Adrian thought he could manipulate. But Leon had always been loyal to me. I need Luciana Sinclair ruined, I said simply. Leon whistled. You want the slow burn or the complete collapse? I grinned. Both. He laughed. Oh, sweetheart, consider it done. By the time I arrived home, my home, since Adrian's name wasn't on the deed, I was ready for the next phase. I poured myself a glass of wine and turned on the news. And there it was. Scandal at Hilton Grand. Billionaire Adrian Monroe humiliates wife in public. The reporters went wild. The footage was everywhere. Adrian slapping me, the shocked gasps, my deadly smile. The media was eating it up. The city was on fire with gossip. Perfect. I leaned back against the couch, sipping my wine. Tomorrow, the real fun would begin. 6 a.m. Adrian's world collapses. Adrian Monroe woke up to his worst nightmare. His phone was ringing off the hook. The bank had frozen his accounts. His company's stocks were plummeting. His business partners were backing away. Scandals were bad for business, and no one wanted to be associated with a man who publicly humiliated his wife. And the cherry on top? Luciana Sinclair was already in trouble. Her entire past was exposed. Turns out, she had a history of ruining wealthy men's marriages and blackmailing them afterward. Every dirty secret, every scam, every lie was splashed across the internet. She wasn't Adrian's secret anymore. She was his embarrassment. By 8 a.m., Adrian was calling me. I ignored him. By 9 a.m., he was outside my mansion, pounding on the doors. I sipped my coffee, watching him through the security cameras. Pathetic. By noon, his company had called for an emergency board meeting. And I walked into that meeting like I owned the place. Because guess what? I did. Adrian Monroe had always believed he was the king, but I was the queen, and I was about to take his throne. Kassandra, please, let's talk. Adrian Monroe looked nothing like the powerful billionaire he once was. His suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and there was a desperate edge to his voice. I stood at the head of the boardroom table, a vision of icy perfection in my tailored black dress, my heels clicking against the polished floor as I took my seat. The room was full. Executives, shareholders, lawyers, but all eyes were on me. Adrian swallowed hard, gripping the back of his chair. Whatever you think you're doing, you need to stop. You're hurting the company. You're hurting me. I arched an eyebrow. Oh, Adrian, I said, my voice smooth. I haven't even started. The boardroom door swung open, and my lawyer, Vincent, strolled in with a thick folder. He dropped it onto the table with a satisfying thud. Ladies and gentlemen, Vincent began, addressing the room, as of this morning, Kassandra DeLuca Monroe is now the majority shareholder of Monroe Enterprises. Gasps erupted around the room. Adrian's face drained of color. What? He choked out. I leaned forward, clasping my hands together. Oh, didn't you hear, darling? While you were busy screwing your little mistress, I was making moves. I spent years investing in secret, buying shares under different names, securing silent partners. I smiled, tilting my head. And now, I own you. Adrian shot up from his seat. You can't do this! I barely blinked. Oh, but I can. Vincent slid a document across the table. As of this moment, the board has voted Kassandra Monroe as the new CEO of Monroe Enterprises, effective immediately. Silence. Then chaos. Executives murmured to each other. Adrian's closest allies glanced at one another, uncertain, afraid. They had always followed power, and right now, I was power. Adrian's hand slammed onto the table. This is my company. I sipped my water, unfazed. Was? Past tense, sweetheart. He turned to the board. You can't be serious. I built this empire. One of the older executives, a man who had worked with Adrian for years, cleared his throat. Actually, Adrian, your wife built it with you. And now, given the scandal, the stock decline, and the overwhelming evidence of financial mismanagement, the board believes a change in leadership is necessary. I watched the words sink into him. This was the moment he realized he had lost everything. His jaw tightened, his hands curled into fists, and then he did something truly pathetic. He turned back to me, his voice low. Kassandra, please, we can fix this. I love you. I laughed, actually laughed. You love me? I echoed, my voice dripping with mockery. Was that before or after you slapped me in front of the entire city? Before or after you paraded your mistress around like she was your queen? Adrian flinched. I stood up, my gaze locked onto his. You humiliated me, Adrian. You made me a joke. And now, I'm rewriting the punchline. His eyes burned with rage. You're making a mistake. I smiled. No, darling, I'm making history. The security guards entered. Mr. Monroe, we need you to leave. Adrian looked at them, then back at me. You think this is over? I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. Oh, Adrian, this is just foreplay. And with that, they escorted him out of the building. With Adrian out of the picture, there was just one loose end left to tie up. Luciana Sinclair thought she had played her cards right. She thought Adrian would leave me, marry her, and she'd become the new Mrs. Monroe. Too bad for her. I don't share. I made one phone call. Leon, I purred, is the package ready? His deep chuckle sent a delicious shiver down my spine. Oh, sweetheart, the whole city's gonna eat this up. An hour later, the internet exploded. A leaked video, a scandalous tape featuring Luciana and, surprise, not Adrian. No, Luciana had multiple men on her payroll. Turns out, my dear husband wasn't her only victim. She had seduced and scammed at least 4 other powerful men before Adrian, draining their bank accounts, ruining their marriages, and then blackmailing them. The press devoured it. Socialite Luciana Sinclair exposed a multi-million-dollar blackmail scheme. The headlines were brutal. The elite cut her off. By the time the sun set, Luciana Sinclair was finished. And I was just getting started. Adrian called me one last time. His voice was hoarse, defeated. Kassandra, I lost everything. I leaned back in my chair, twirling a glass of wine between my fingers. I know. You destroyed me, he whispered. I smirked. No, sweetheart, you destroyed yourself. I just gave the world a front row seat. There was silence, a deep, heavy silence. And then, in the softest, most broken voice, he asked, Did you ever love me? I closed my eyes for a second. Once, a long time ago, the answer would have been yes. But now, I exhaled. You should have never laid a hand on me, Adrian. And then, without another word, I ended the call. Tomorrow, I would wake up as the most powerful woman in the city, and Adrian Monroe, he would wake up as nothing. You're going to regret this, Kassandra. Adrian's voice was low, almost a whisper, but the venom in it was unmistakable. He stood outside my mansion, his suit drenched in sweat, his desperation barely concealed behind those wild, defeated eyes. He was no longer the polished billionaire who once ruled boardrooms with a single glance. No, this was a man who had lost everything, who had been reduced to nothing overnight. I took a slow sip of my wine, standing just inside the doorway, watching him from the other side of the threshold. My security team was already positioned at the entrance, ready to throw him off the property at my command. But I wasn't done with him just yet. I smirked. Regret? I tilted my head. Darling, I regret not destroying you sooner. His jaw clenched. I loved you, Kassandra. I let out a soft laugh. Oh, please, you loved control, you loved power, and you loved the thrill of humiliating me. I stepped forward just enough so he could see the amusement in my eyes. And now, look at you. Begging? His lips parted, but no words came. Because we both knew it was true. He had spent years believing I was his trophy, his perfect little wife who would stand beside him no matter what. But the moment he put his hands on me, the moment he showed the world his true colors, he lost me forever. I turned to my head of security. Make sure Mr. Monroe never steps foot on my property again. The guards moved in immediately. Adrian stiffened, his pride warring with his desperation. But in the end, he turned and walked away. He had no choice. He had nothing left. And as I watched him go, I felt nothing. No sympathy. No guilt. Just satisfaction. The city was already buzzing with the aftermath of his downfall. Monroe Enterprises had officially removed him from everything. His bank accounts were drained, his luxury assets seized, and his influence shattered beyond repair. He wasn't just broke. He was untouchable. No one wanted to associate with a man who had fallen so far, so fast. And Luciana? Oh, she had disappeared. The last I heard, she was trying to flee the country to escape the scandal. No one knew where she was, and honestly, I didn't care. She was insignificant now, just another footnote in the story of Adrian Monroe's destruction. I stepped back into my mansion, shutting the door behind me. The weight of the past, the years of manipulation, betrayal, and humiliation, it was all gone. I walked up to my bedroom, kicked off my heels, and poured myself another drink. As I stared out over the city skyline, I let out a slow, satisfied breath. Adrian had always thought he was the king, but in the end, it was the queen who won the game. And I had won. I had everything: power, control, freedom. And as I took my first sip, a wicked smile played on my lips. Because this was just the beginning. Game over, Adrian.